They humiliated him for his clothes and judged him for his origins, but he returned with a proposal that would make history. Between roots and technology, his vision flourished. What no one expected was that he would also bring justice to those who had despised him. Welcome to the channel. Before we begin, leave your like and subscribe so we can continue creating stories like this one. On that suffocating Tuesday morning, Mark Oliver woke up before dawn, as was his custom. He put on boots marked by the reddish soil of rural Virginia, wore his worn cotton shirt and firmly adjusted the straw hat he had inherited from his grandfather, old Sebastian. As he left the modest adobe house, he didn't even look back. The New Dawn farm, although rich in history and extension, was struggling to stay afloat. The debts incurred after his father's departure, the impossible-to-pay bank loans, and last, summer's drought had reduced his investment capacity to almost nothing. The whiskey distillery fields, once prosperous under the guidance of his family for generations, now barely provided enough to subsist. However, in Mark's chest burned a flame that not even adversity could extinguish. There was something he needed to do urgently: go to Richmond and talk to an old acquaintance about a collaboration proposal that could save his land. The 2-hour journey to the city gave him time to contemplate the landscape he loved so much. The imposing mountains in the background, the fields golden by the sun, and the impossibly blue sky. All of this was part of his blood, his essence. He couldn't lose it. He wouldn't allow it. Upon arriving at the small, elegant cafe, the Emerald, in the historic center, Mark stopped in front of the window display. His face was sweaty, his hands slightly stained with grease from the old pickup truck that had brought him there. But his eyes had brightness and determination, the same that his mother, Mrs. Sarah, always said he had inherited from his grandfather. He opened the glass door and approached the counter. Before he could speak a word, the attendant, a middle-aged woman named Carla Vance, looked him up and down. Her gaze, loaded with prejudice, was quick and cutting like the edge of a machete. "This isn't a place to ask for handouts. Go seek charity elsewhere," she said coldly, while adjusting her impeccable uniform. Surprised and humiliated, Mark stood motionless. The words got stuck in his throat. He felt the gazes of elegantly dressed customers stabbing into his back. Without reacting, he simply turned around and left. The door closed behind him with a dry sound that hurt more than any insult. "I didn't come all the way here to return empty-handed," he muttered to himself, clenching his fists. Hours later, he managed to meet with his old acquaintance, engineer Edward Mason, an agricultural consultant who, despite having developed his career in New York, had always admired young Oliver's tenacity. They met at a restaurant near City Park. "Mark, what a pleasure to see you after so long," exclaimed Edward, embracing him with genuine affection. During lunch, Mark presented his farm modernization plan, a proposal for sustainable cultivation with the support of American agricultural startups specializing in corn and other native plants. Edward listened attentively, his eyes shining more and more with each detail of the project. "This isn't just viable, Mark. It's the future," exclaimed the consultant enthusiastically. "The combination of traditional techniques with cutting-edge technology. It's exactly what our countryside needs." In less than 2 hours, the two closed a partnership. Resources, technology, and knowledge would once again be part of that forgotten land. Edward committed to investing a considerable amount and securing support from an investment fund focused on sustainable agriculture. "Let's toast to New Dawn and its new awakening," said Edward, raising his coffee cup. With renewed confidence and a signed contract in his pocket, Mark decided to do something he didn't even expect himself. Dressed in the same clothes, but with a completely different posture, he returned to the Emerald. He entered slowly, observing the environment, and headed back to the counter. Carla, seeing him again, frowned. "I already told you that," she began to say, but was interrupted by a man in a suit accompanying Mark. It was Frank Torres, the person responsible for real estate negotiations at Regional Bank, and there, at that exact moment, they sealed the purchase of the cafe. Her stroke of luck had made the owner, an elderly man who had decided to retire, put it up for sale just that week. "Mr. Oliver, congratulations on your acquisition," said the banker, shaking Mark's hand as Carla watched the scene with her mouth open. The impact of the purchase quickly reverberated among the neighborhood's residents. What few knew was that Mark decided to keep all the employees, except Foynhala, the attendant who had humiliated him, not out of revenge but out of conviction. The community needed people who built up, not those who destroyed with words. Words have the power to build or to tear down, he explained to Lisa, the new manager, as they reviewed the staff contracts. And I want to build something that lasts. That night, as Mark drove back to his farm, a smile formed on his tired face. It wasn't the end of his problems, he knew well. It was just the beginning of a much bigger battle. But for the first time in a long time, he felt he had the weapons to fight. What he didn't imagine was that the seed of envy had already been planted in the heart of someone close, someone who wasn't willing to see his success flourish without trying to uproot it. The news of the purchase of the emerald by a young farmer from the countryside spread like wildfire through the cobblestone streets of Richmond. A week later, Mark was invited to participate in a meeting of the Virginia Rural Producers Council, where he would present his innovative agricultural management model. The event hall of the Gold Creek Hotel was full of skeptical faces. Older, men with thick mustaches and women with severe looks, observed the young man with disdain when he took the floor. His presentation on the fusion of ancestral indigenous techniques with cutting-edge technology was met with disguised laughter. "And this country bumpkin playing intellectual is going to teach us what?" muttered Robert Montgomery, one of the region's most influential farmers, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Field dreamer, that's what you are." Mark's face tensed, but he maintained his composure. Just when the murmur of mockery began to grow, a firm voice rose from the back of the room. "I support this initiative." Everyone turned around in surprise. It was Mrs. Adelaide Norton, an 80-year-old producer venerated by all. Her family had cultivated corn for 5 generations, and her artisanal whiskey, Golden Tears, was considered one of the best in the country. "This young man has vision," continued the elderly woman, approaching with slow but determined steps. "And we have too many wrinkles in our eyes to see beyond our noses. I will invest in your project." The silence that followed was more eloquent than any applause. The unexpected support from Mrs. Adelaide changed the tide of local opinion. By the end of the meeting, 3 more producers had shown interest in collaborating with Mark. Meanwhile, Edward worked tirelessly to transform the Emerald. For 2 months, the place remained closed for renovations. Curious onlookers gathered in front of the covered windows, trying to guess what would happen to the emblematic establishment. The grand reopening was quite an event. The Emerald had become a community center with an organic cafe, reading space, and workshops on rural entrepreneurship. The products served came exclusively from small producers in the region, including corn from the New Dawn farm. "This isn't just a business," Mark explained to local journalists during the inauguration. "It's a bridge between the countryside and the city, between tradition and innovation." Carla, the former attendant, observed the celebration from afar. With her face contorted by regret, she approached Mark when the crowd began to disperse. "Mr. Oliver, I've come to apologize," she said with a trembling voice. "I was terribly wrong about you." Mark looked at her fixedly, remembering the humiliation of that first encounter. Then with serenity he simply replied, "Words carry weight, Carla, and actions even more so. I wish you well." Without adding anything else, he turned to attend to the guests, leaving the woman with the word in her mouth and a lesson she would never forget. At the New Dawn farm, the changes were equally notable. New drip irrigation systems, solar panels, and a laboratory for developing drought-resistant seeds transformed the landscape. 25 families from the community found stable employment in the project. However, not everything was going well. Edward began to show strange behaviors. He cancelled important meetings, presented inaccurate reports on expenses, and seemed nervous when Mark mentioned an audit. "It's unnecessary, partner," insisted the consultant. "Trust me, we're growing at a good pace." Mark's intuition, however, did not deceive him. One night, reviewing documents in the office they had installed at the farm, he found duplicate invoices and transfers to unknown accounts. Edward had been diverting funds from the beginning, taking advantage of his trust. The confrontation was inevitable and painful. "Why, Edward?" asked Mark, showing him the evidence. "I believed we were friends, that we shared the same vision." Edward's face paled, but soon transformed into an expression of disdain. "The same vision? I am an engineer graduated with honors from New York. You're just a lucky farmer. This money belongs to me for my knowledge." Mark, with a broken heart but a clear mind, made a difficult decision to break the partnership and continue alone. The legal separation was costly and tense but necessary. Edward tried to boycott the project by spreading rumors about its non-viability, but the quality of Mark's work spoke for itself. The real test came when the mayor of Gold Creek, Don Raymond Valencia, pressured by businessmen envious of the young man's success, began to impose bureaucratic obstacles. Surprise inspections, fines for technicalities, and delays in licenses became usual. "That's how things are in America, boy," the municipal official told him cynically during an unexpected visit. "If you want the wheel to turn, you need to apply oil." Mark perfectly understood the insinuation, but refused to participate in that game. Instead of giving in to the bribe, he conceived an audacious plan to unite the community. He began organizing meetings at the Emerald with farmers, small business owners, and neighbors benefited by his initiatives. The response was overwhelming. More than 200 people showed up to support him. "You're not alone, Mark," Mrs. Adelaide assured him, taking his hand. "The people have memory and know how to recognize who works for the common good." Together, they drafted a formal petition demanding the review of administrative procedures against New Dawn. They collected signatures, organized peaceful demonstrations, and attracted the attention of national media. The mayor, cornered by public pressure, had no alternative but to back down. The licenses were granted and the fines were annulled. The victory was celebrated as their own by each family in the community. That night, contemplating the sunset from the porch of the family home, Mark understood that he had achieved something much more valuable than business success. He had sown hope in hearts that had forgotten how to dream. A year after the confrontations with the mayor, the New Dawn Farm had become a national example of sustainable agricultural innovation. What began as a desperate attempt to save the family heritage now shone as a beacon of hope for other rural communities in America. On the morning when Mark received the letter with the logo of the Department of Agriculture, the sun was just beginning to appear behind the mountains of Virginia. His hands, still rough from daily work in the field, trembled slightly as he opened the envelope. "Dear Mr. Oliver," he read aloud to himself, "we are pleased to invite you as the keynote speaker at the First National Congress of Rural Social Entrepreneurship." He couldn't continue reading. Emotion tightened his throat. This conference in Washington, D.C. would bring together the most innovative leaders in the country. Being selected as the main speaker meant that his work was changing perceptions at the national level. "Dad, you always knew these lands had soul," he murmured, looking at the portrait of Mr. Julius Oliver that presided over the room. That afternoon, when sharing the news at the Emerald, the joy was collective. The patrons of the place spontaneously organized a celebration. Among hugs and congratulations, Mark looked for Lisa, the manager, who had transformed the business into a true cultural center. Their eyes met among the crowd. Something had changed between them in recent months. What began as a strictly professional relationship had blossomed into something deeper, although neither dared to put it into words yet. "We should take the Emerald to the conference," she suggested, approaching with a shy smile. "Set up a small booth to show how a cafe can also be a catalyst for social change." The idea was brilliant, like everything that came from Lisa. Mark nodded, marveling once more at the intelligence and sensitivity of this woman who had appeared in his life just when he most needed to believe in human goodness. During the weeks prior to the Congress, the work was frantic. Mark divided his time between preparing his speech, supervising the farm, and collaborating with Lisa to create an impactful presentation of the Emerald. The day before leaving for the capital, Mark received an unexpected visit. Carla, the former attendant who had humiliated him on that first day, was waiting in front of the main door of the farm. "What brings you here?" he asked, without hostility but with caution. "I've come to deliver this to you," she replied, extending a yellowed envelope. "It's a letter that your father wrote to mine many years ago. I found it among his things when he passed away last month." Confused, Mark took the envelope. Inside was a letter dated 20 years ago and a faded photograph where two smiling young men appeared, one of them undoubtedly his father. "My father and yours were best friends in their youth," explained Carla with a choked voice. "They had a terrible dispute over some land and never reconciled. He taught me to hate you without knowing you, to see you as the son of the man who supposedly betrayed us." The revelation fell upon Mark like a shower in the middle of the desert. So many years of resentment based on a generational misunderstanding. He read the letter in silence, discovering that his father had tried to reconcile, even offering a partnership that Carla's father had rejected out of pride. "Hatred is an inheritance that we can decide not to accept," Mark finally said, carefully, folding the letter. "I thank you for coming." There were no big hugs or shared tears, but something healed in that moment. An invisible wound that had been festering for generations finally began to heal. The conference in Washington, D.C. exceeded all expectations. The Emerald booth was one of the most visited, and Mark's talk about the integration of rural communities into sustainable economies received a standing ovation. But when the culminating moment arrived, Mark surprised everyone by departing from the prepared script. He didn't talk about figures or business strategies. He talked about dignity. "My grandfather used to say that the land doesn't belong to who buys it, but to who loves it," he began, looking directly at the audience. "Today, I understand that the same occurs with respect. It doesn't belong to who demands it, but to who sows it every day with their actions." With simplicity but with emotion, he shared his personal story without mentioning names. He related how the prejudice of a simple attendant had pushed him to become something greater than he had ever imagined. "That humiliation was my best teacher," he confessed. "It taught me that sometimes the most painful obstacles are actually doors to better versions of ourselves." As he finished his speech, while the applause resonated, he looked for Lisa among the crowd. Her eyes were shining with contained tears and a smile that illuminated the entire room. At that moment, he had the certainty that he had found not only his professional purpose, but also his life companion. The return to Virginia was a journey full of shared plans and dreams. The New Dawn farm would be consolidated as an agricultural research center. The Emerald would open branches in other cities, and most importantly, Mark proposed to Lisa during the trip in an impulse born from the deepest conviction. 3. Months later, in a simple ceremony celebrated among the cornfields, Mark and Lisa united their lives. Among the guests was Carla, now working in one of the social programs of the foundation they had created together. Mrs. Adelaide was also there, who in her speech as godmother perfectly summarized Mark's journey. This young man didn't become a hero, millionaire, or celebrity. He continues to wear the same hat, the same boots, but with the difference that now he inspires other ordinary people to believe in the value of perseverance, reinvention, and above all, humility. The sun was beginning to hide behind the mountains, tinting the sky with intense oranges and reds, when Mark took his wife's hand and contemplated his lands. They weren't the same ones he had inherited. They were better, more fertile, more just. "You know, Lisa, I think I now understand the name my grandfather chose for this place," he murmured. "New Dawn?" she asked, resting her head on her husband's shoulder. "Yes," he nodded, "because each day is an opportunity to start anew, to do things better than yesterday." And so among the golden fields of corn, under an infinite sky, Mark Oliver understood that he had found his true dawn. Dear listeners, we hope that Mark Oliver's story has moved you and shown that dignity and perseverance can transform not only a life, but an entire community. To follow this emotional journey, we have prepared a special list with equally captivating stories of rural entrepreneurs who are changing America. Find it here by clicking to your left. If you liked this story of overcoming and poetic justice, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like to the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of American life, its traditions and its dreams for the future. Which lessons seemed most important to you from Mark's story? Perseverance in the face of adversity, forgiveness to those who hurt us, or the importance of maintaining our roots while innovating? We await you in the comments to continue this conversation.